I guess we're on.
Right on. Howdy, partner.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Nice to finally get face to face.
Yeah, thanks. It was really glad. I'm glad that you contacted me, and I'm happy to talk. I mean, what should we talk about?
Today was some of mine. I noticed you have a video on the front. It's a video that pops up to any newcomer today. It's about you're talking about something to do with self-righteousness, and you talk about it in you give it this connotation of it being a disease that disease of the mind that hops around between disciplines. And it just got me thinking about, the human need to have answers, right from the beginning and further into their adulthood lives. And I'm just noticing a lot in my own studies in the law faculty, because it's just legal scholars talk very openly about the need to sound authoritative, for judges to sound like they're speaking truth as opposed to just giving an opinion with no actual philosophical basis. And it's amazing to me how deep we get into this territory, and nobody seems to really question it at a fundamental level. And I've got to deal with it every single day, and it's hard coming from a philosophical background into that, because it seems like you're shedding away all of this approach to thinking and this methodology that you work so hard to attain. Like you're shedding it away for something more shallow.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that's right. I mean, there's so many different examples to get at it. I mean, not only can you go up to a young child and you can point to something, you point to a mug and you say, "Look, it's a couch," and the kid will say, "No, that's a mug." You can rile a kid by pointing to things and purposefully misnaming them. I mean, a child, when it's first learning the language, it loves to point to things and correctly say what that is. It's like it wins all kinds of approval and sort of stuff. And it gets, I think, more subtle as, life is just filled with so many ambiguities and so many places where we're not certain, that then authority, it helps stave off the ongoing terror of being uncertain about everything. So it's sometimes called the rhetoric of nonverbal authority, where a person, if you look at like umpires, the umpire goes, "Strike!" He doesn't go, "Strike!" The umpire has to say it in a way that conveys with authority what it is. And, people can yell, "Ooh, that was a bad call," or whatever, but, the authority is granted to the umpire that no matter what the umpire calls, it is what that umpire, we give authority to the umpire, but the umpire then has to put on this posture of, calling it as it is, and I think that's part of what's going on.
It's interesting you use the word horror, because, there's that Hegelian argument that that's what you need. You need to be staring into the abyss. A man needs to stare into the abyss and know his own character. And I kind of think of that when is the appropriate time to introduce that kind of profound existential understanding into human beings' lives. And I read an interesting article the other day about somebody was actually arguing that there should be schools devoted to atheism, and students are sent to these schools, and they're taught at a very early age that there is no God. And somebody proposed this to Richard Dawkins, and he said, "No, there's something about being a child that requires you to have this stable hold over some kind of objective state of how the world works, and that if you take this away, it's a very dangerous thing, slippery slope, in that you don't. What does a child face with no sense of order? Yeah. What does that do to
Well, I think, this is where it gets to be meta level, and you can have, like hierarchical levels of understanding of, you can have truth as a tentative truth, understanding that subsequent insights may require revision. And that doesn't mean that no one knows anything, but it doesn't mean that we're certain. I think there has to be a sophistication. So I think a parent, when a child asks something, a parent can try to give a response and then ultimately look at the kid and go, seriously, no one really knows. Isn't that fascinating? And to try to force the issue that for the centuries people have been asking these questions, and around the world there have been so many different creative responses. And to what extent can you find hints of livable truth across those different traditions? And sometimes when the child's asking something, they may not be asking exactly what they appear to be asking. If I could maybe turn the discussion a little bit I've watched some of so many responses to what's going on Wall Street, and I really applaud. I posted things on my Facebook about the ridiculous statistics on what CEOs make in the U.S. compared to what your average worker makes, and then comparatively across the globe, and some of those things. But I look at some of and I'll pick on Stephen Molyneux here. Maybe I don't think he still watches my videos, but this guy gets thousands and thousands of views. He's tons of people watch his stuff, and he does this ridiculous simplifying straw man of the corporations versus the state. The state has become this scapegoated whipping boy. It's the source of all that's wrong. And these corporations, well, they happen to be the beneficiaries of the state, but they're good motived, fine people, and their morals come from somewhere other than state schools, but the state schools are to blame for the people who are the bureaucrats who are sticking it to everyone. And it's sort of like, as much as so much of what he's talking about has resonance of truth, he's just substituting one kind of ridiculous dogma for another, as if unfettered, just pure capitalist state with no regulation at all wouldn't call for new forms of ways of policing it. Now, what, you're going to have privatized police? You're going to have privatized education? You're going to have privatized roads? You could say that someone can do that. Okay, let's say that. I think immediately when evil actions occur, then what happens to the person who has been, who's making sure due process is being taken up here? I'm frightened of a completely privatized law enforcement and a completely privatized judicial system. I guess I want to say, well, what exactly would that mean? You see what I mean? So I see it there. It's kind of like, the simplest way to say it is, and I'm going to pick this up as well. This was a comment on one of TJ's videos recently. A person said, why doesn't TJ respond to this? How have the most bizarre forms of self-righteousness in the atheist community really come from the alignment of the Ayn Randian objectivism? How have those strange bedfellows come together? There's, I think, one of the core of the dogmatisms that you're going to find in the atheist community, and through YouTube. This kind of radical objectivism, and what it is it's people who prefer novels to reality. Because if the world were one-dimensional and simplistic and like nothing but an idea, then some of the Randian philosophy would work. But the truth is, it's stickier, messier, and a lot more complicated than that.
I've got a very guilty confession in that I've read Atlas Shrugged, and I was very, very influenced by it.
It's a great book.
Just to qualify that, I came into it as a very left wing, bleeding heart liberal, and I did it on purpose because it's kind of this Heideggerian humility thing where you try to jump out of your shell and you get into the other side in a drastic way. And I picked up this book at the height of my left-leaning state of mind, and that's how I did it. And the thing about that book is that she drives the message home over and over and over again. And like you said, it's coupled with this rhetoric of self-righteousness that she does so well to convey over and over. It's less about whether whether her philosophy makes sense or whether it's a viable political system, and more about how she matches it with this egotism in her characters, in Dag and Taggart, and the kind of emotional relationships she has to people and what she values in the men she sees. And reading 1,000 pages of this woman's work, we start to think it's inevitable. You start to think the way that her characters start to think. And it gets us back to that pedagogy thing, the standards that we imbue kids with early on, these things that they say, okay, when I see other people talking in this way, this is a sign that something is true, and this is a sign that something makes sense to me. So we see somebody speaking affirmatively with the right tones of voice, using the right words, and they sound authoritative on Fox News. And it doesn't matter what's behind that.
Oh, right.
It matters the delivery. It seems to be a key.
Right. No, I think that's true, but I guess I wouldn't dispute all that. I mean, I guess I would say though that going back to this philosophical thing, I think the point is that you can have thinkers who have really great insights, and they're important for people to read and understand, but you don't have to become like a one-eyed maniacal ideologue for it. You don't have to plant a flag right in your leg and go, this is what I pledge allegiance to. You can say, look at the brilliant insight. There is something that's very right-minded to say that a person who isn't selfish is dangerous. They're dangerous if they're not selfish. But a person who is only self-serving, they're as dangerous. They don't realize how much of what they take to be their entitled privileges and prerogatives have already been furnished by lots of anonymous others. And you know what I mean?
I just want to say that there's two ways you can look at this. And one of them is that there are people who just, in every aspect of their life, don't want to put the effort in to develop kind of nuanced understanding of any issue.
Of anything, right.
But then there's a second group of people who have that. And it seems to me that it's partly influenced by, just the nature of the medium of YouTube itself, but it's so hard to get across a nuanced view and keep it consistent and non-contradictory, and worse, harder yet, to get somebody to not misrepresent everything and mischaracterize the views that you do set forth. That I don't even know if this medium can deal with the kind of nuance needed for actual progressing discussion, and not kind of inevitably lead people into this Manichean black and white type of outlook.
Right, I think that's the deal.
If it's doable, you do such a good job off the top of your head speaking in a conditional, qualifying manner. I'm wowed by, because myself I'm still doing scripts. I can't speak off the top of my head like you can. So I mean, but it takes some I guess teachers training, because I can't see many people actually getting across what they have to say through video and through oral.
Right. Well, I mean, you don't have to schmooze me and all that. I mean, that's nice. I guess I've been teaching college for 20 years now. I mean, I think I look young. I've been doing it a long time. But I guess, I mean, I think some of that is that I guess I'm trying to get at where I think the problem is. I mean, I think it's so much of it is that theory of everything stuff. I mean, I think there's a motivation for people to want to be consistent and to not be able to tolerate ambiguity. And let me see if I can say it this way, that recently somebody was asking in class about whether or not these different theories, and we try to read primary sources rather than a textbook. And so we'll read, a little bit of R.D. Laing, and then we'll read some Gregory Bateson, then we'll read some Suzanne Langer, whatever. We read a lot of different people. And they sometimes will say, well, this author is really kind of advocating this, and this author is really kind of advocating, something else. And a lot of it had to do with this question of candor and frankness, about the importance of being honest with people, and then also about the importance of being sensitive, polite, and potentially, covering over information in the interest of being diplomatic and or smoothing things over. And they were going, well, what do I do? And I think it's interesting that people want a solution or a recipe, and it's not only do textbooks create the illusion that there is this consolidated information base, this grand edifice of knowledge that is cohering and coming together, but I think the internet writ large is giving that as well. People act as if they go on the internet, they're going to sort out and find the coherent, resonant picture, rather than realizing, look, everything that's known is known by someone. There's an ongoing dialogue of humanity, and either you learn how to jump into the fray of the dialogue, or you end up thinking that there's this thing called information stuff, and you're trying to get it. And see, I think when people want this information stuff, what they really want is to not be responsible. See, the dogmatism is a fear of responsibility. And so the more that I can have the truth, the less I'm responsible for anything I do, because I go, look, the facts are right there. I'm just doing what they said. I'm following out the truth. It's a way of people hiding from responsibility and making a claim going, here is what I assert, and I'm going to live by my assertion.
I can definitely see that with more intelligent adults who are mature enough to know that they shouldn't be manipulating things in that way. But I do think that this tendency for us to think of the world or think of truth in terms of our minds are receptacle. We have to go out and get these things, as opposed to thinking about it as an organic flow of whatever it is between non-entities, the entities being anything we want to define them as being. It gets back to just the analytic tradition of anything English. It's just our history. I guess I'm not familiar to the same extent as you with American philosophy these days, or in the 20th century, that kind of is in touch with the continental tradition of, say, Heidegger's strain and everything. But for me, it's always seemed that America and England and just the main groups of thinkers have always been coming from this analytic approach, and it has to do with science, and it has to do with having to deconstruct everything into a manageable entity that you can wield around and kind of apply to some kind of scientific methodology.
Sure.
And in order to have the methodology, you need to establish the pieces of the game.
Right. I mean, I think
the puzzle you used in the first place.
No, I mean, I think that's
sorry,
right. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not trying to interrupt you.
No, I'm just the way people manipulate facts. I think there's this underlying, deeply profound way they approach everything, and it's more to do with them. I think it's less to do with them knowing they're manipulating this than they're just, that's how they think. They don't have the openness.
No, I agree. I mean, I think of people like Alfred Korzybski and the general semantics movement that happened in the 40s and 50s. I mean, it's still alive, and there are still people I'm actively involved in that. But I mean, I think there were scientists right after the war who all had come together, and it was people like Einstein and Heisenberg and Gödel, and that entire tradition of thinkers, Lobachevsky and Riemann, that entire tradition of thinkers who got out of what they were calling the Aristotelian tradition of the excluded middle. I mean, there's a sense in which they started to introduce the idea that it isn't everything is either A or not A. You can have something both be A and not A. And you get into this problems of plurality of of views. I mean, not only did, I guess, uncertainty principle introduce a lot of this, but the notion of the impossibility of a fully complete system, I think, was a reminder of this. You know,
the question.
Go ahead.
The question for me, I guess you can analogize it to this trickle-down theories in economics. You know, is the money trickling down from these corporate CEOs? You know, there's the cultural CEOs, and are these ideas trickling down to the rest of the people? You know, uneducated people of different disciplines. How influential are these ideas on the actual culture? You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the trickle down, the further you get from the source, the more it turns to black and white. When it comes out the source, it could be various colors. The further it gets from the source, it ends up people have pulled black from one and white from the other. You know, it's sort of interesting how that happens. I mean, rather than going to the philosophical issues, maybe ones on YouTube would be religious issues. Like, I see, just as an example, many people who say, well, I want nothing to do with religion because it's false. And I want to say, well, look, you know, there are people, you know, if some person says, I believe in the Bible because it's true. To me, I go, I don't even know what you're talking about. If you say that you have a religion because you can see the truth of it in your life, and you see your life being a qualitatively better person because of your religious beliefs and your spiritual practices, that's its own kind of truth. Now, whether any of that's true in some metaphysical way, that to me is silly. In the same way that a person who says, I dismiss religious belief and spirituality because it's false, I say, well, is that working for you? Is your life better as a result of that? Are you living that philosophy in a robust way? Does it help you in your education? If the person says yes, I say, good for you. It has to be in some way livable. Or, again, I think a person is making an appeal to a dogmatic truth because what they really want is some facts to shoulder the human burden of choice, responsibility, of what it means to be a self-aware organism.
Well, your suggestion could be mischaracterized as, you know, disingenuous.
Okay, what do you mean?
Some people believe there's one right way about it, and the thing you seem to suggest is that maybe, you know, if it feels good, do it. But there's a lot of people who can say, you know, if it feels good, well, a religious person who gets the fulfillment out of believing in certain things because it makes sense to them, and it you know.
I would try to move them out of the truth issue and ask them what it is they're trying to do when they're playing that game. I would take every one of their beliefs, take each one of the beliefs, the belief in divine intervention, the belief in the resurrection, the belief in the virgin birth, and go each one of those, what is it a metaphor for? What is the psychological truth that the ancients were trying to convey in this linguistic or symbolic image? And then, are you able to live it? I would try to push them out of the it's true or it's not true. I would just get out of that. I don't think anything's true. We're animals, chattering noises. You're like a bat using echolocation. Are you navigating toward your future successfully or not?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know about some of the views you have. I mean, are there any of these things that influence you on a day-to-day basis? Because I know that for me, for a lot of years, that was exactly it. I had these views about religion because I wanted them to be true. So it was more about the affirming them as being right, as opposed to asking, okay, why
Right.
is it important?
Right. I mean, so many of my videos are trying to suggest that the ancients were there at the dawn of self-awareness, and they were trying to document some of the psychological insights about how meaning operates, and then it got cloaked and appropriated in dogmatic discourse, and it did become, you know, I guess in some way problematized, or it became problematic in organized religions. But I think the people who are going to throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater, they're missing some of the insights that so many, and you'd have to do world religions. You can't just do Christianity, but the more that you comparatively look at various faith traditions, you start to see this common concern over what is the good life, what is justice, what is the way to ensure wisdom and peace of mind. And I think a lot of these, when you prune them away from and again, they didn't have epistemological truth conditions as we understand, making assertions. I mean, the whole notion of literal truth as we understand it is so much the product of literacy and really the product of the printing press, and then post-printing press, really Enlightenment philosophy and, the age of reason. And so to try to apply the kind of standards of epistemological truth that we have to these ancient texts is really ridiculous. I mean, it's worse than anachronistic. It's just deeply, deeply misunderstanding it. And it's not to say, well, it's all just relative. I don't think that's the case at all. I think there are insights that resonate enough with enough people that the dogma has been able to hold on to people for many centuries. That is, there's enough of rubber meeting the road there that people mistakenly find the meaning that they're getting to somehow be hinged to the truth of it, rather than having the meaning be a fact about an organism who evolved capacities for love, compassion, self-awareness, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you kind of see them as virtues as formally packed and charged, full of cargo. They're ships that have become something of an empty vessel. There's something about the restrictedness of words. You're drawing boundaries around something that when there is an actual shift in the culture and the words need to shift along with it, sometimes it's something about language that lags behind. It takes some time for it to shift. I think that was a big problem in post-World War I, when you have a lot of the Victorian values, and there's just all these ideas and assumptions about progress and science and technology being good. It was flipped on its head because we saw just how horrible a lot of it was, and how empty these things like valor and glory and all these traditional romantic virtues were, and how some of the meaning was sucked out of it. I think it has to do with the compartmentalization that comes along with rationalization of all its forms, whether it's language or alphabetization of society itself, in terms of just organizing modern society with bureaucracy coming up in the 19th century and all that. I guess one of the things, though, that I'm not too sure about is whether I don't know if this is going to make sense, but the objectivity of collective unconsciousness, is it individual specific, specific to the individual, the kinds of meanings that are going to come out of some of these ancient symbols or romantic era symbols or Enlightenment era.
What's the difference between, say, truth, knowledge, and wisdom? And if I can sort of poach on this while we're thinking about that, is, somebody posted on my channel just recently, I think it was Count Hector, who I like, he posted on my channel a question like, that he heard in a video where I was being critical of people playing video games, and he wanted to know what was my opinion on video games. And okay, so I thought maybe this would be like a good launching pad into that issue, right? Where, do I think that video games are derelict and kind of a waste of time and whatnot? Well, it depends upon what you want to do with your life. I guess I don't want to say that they're bad, but I do want to say that there are people who know when they're playing video games when they shouldn't be. And that's what I'm concerned with. I'm not going to tell you if you're that person. Every person's going to have to decide for themselves. Whether it's eating too many munchies, whether it's watching TV, whether it's doing the video games, there seems to be this recurrent phenomena where a wise person recognizes it. And we don't have to argue about the truth of the issue. People want to squabble about the truth. What they're really playing is a psychological game to hide from responsibility. People who want to enter into the wisdom dialogue, there you start to be honest with yourself. And I don't know, is there this Jungian thing that makes us all equal? I don't know. Look at yourself and try to notice the moments where and when you're doing what you know you really ought not be doing, because you know you have better things that you should be up to, and you have a sense. See, there's a great story. I'll just end this. There's a great story where Thayer tells. It's called the Lumpy story. The student comes into his office. He says, "Professor, can you tell me what I should read?" And he says, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And he says, "Well, I don't know." And he laughs and he says, "Well, then it doesn't matter what you read. You know, it only matters once you have a sense of what you want to be when you grow up." And I don't mean occupation. I don't mean like what kind of job. I mean, what kind of a person, what kind of a human being do you want to be? What kind of character do you want to have cultivated? The substance of your being, do you want your great memories to be your high score on Donkey Kong? Now, if that's what you want, fine. I'm not going to tell you it's bad. It's not what I want. It's not. Now, could there be a revolution in gaming, and gaming's going to change consciousness and education? Sure, but that's not part of my future. That's not part of the destiny I'm on right now.
I guess the question I have to ask, though, is, what is the source of that when you are turning inwards? For me, it seemed as if the standards I use to evaluate that question are as manipulable as my decision to continue playing the video game or to eat the munchies itself. It feels like I can sort of, either that I can control the standards by which I assess if I'm doing what I'm doing, if it's good or bad, or there's kind of this physiological inevitability that I'm going to feel bad doing this, no matter what. I guess I'm wondering about the source of that consciousness, the conscience.
Yeah. Well,
whether it's something I can change.
Well, I mean, my sense is that it's ambiguous, and that's part of the agony. I mean, there is a sense in which, we do want to do great things and make contributions, and there's other times where you want to sit on the couch and eat a chip and relax. And that's part of the ambiguous truth of it. And this is why, when I was doing that haggle with Gary, I was going, look, don't you think Mother Teresa ever went, geez, I kind of ignored my cousin's funeral or a close relative's birthday. I mean, didn't she have other obligations? Are all of our obligations to complete unknown, this children starving in other worlds? Where are our obligations? And I think one can end up going, well, who knows? I think, again, a mature, more wise response is to recognize the ambiguity and then to realize that life is short, and, the price you pay when you pay attention is that you can't pay attention to anything else. And then the question becomes, where are your priorities? I mean, what exactly will you do? I think people try to find meaningful work. They try to find meaningful, engagement in the world. The problem, if I do have a problem with video games or YouTube, I would just say it this way. It's that in Sartre's terms, it doesn't have enough coefficients of adversity. It doesn't have what Burke would call enough recalcitrance. The real world has enough resistance to actually make meaningful effort it actually blooms against the resistance. There's so little resistance on the internet. It's leveled down to an aesthetically thin soup rather than a real stew of meaningful activity. It's little simple gratifications from hardly any effort.
Yeah, I guess it's the type. I guess you have to ask, what is the type of satisfaction you're looking for? Because there are types of satisfaction, more like contentness, that don't need to bring that Nietzschean will to power.
Yes, I love a nap. I love a nap.
Yeah.
What's wrong with a nap?
What is meaningful meaning?
I think a nap is a hell of a lot better than sitting around watching the tube. And I mean the television. Like, you're going to somebody's going to be on YouTube. If you're going to use YouTube as a playground to exercise the stoic virtue of indifference to others' opinions, well, good for you. You're going to get on here and practice your public speaking skills, good for you. You're going to get on here and learn about TED Talks, good for you. You're going to sit around and do melodrama and ego pandering by self-righteous indignation over someone who believes different than you? Enjoy. It's ridiculous.
Many forms, but I guess, YouTube's got its own.
People who don't know what they want to be when they grow up don't.
I guess. Well, I don't know.
Be careful.
It's kind of an odd thing. This summer, I always have this thing where I've kind of got a maxim or a golden rule that I've set for myself in my, I'm young and it's easy to manage. One of the first ones, first getting into university, was always do the right thing. I told myself that, and it was kind of guided me. I don't know how in effect it played out. I guess it turned me into kind of a neurotic student that got me grades and always did something that was hard and challenging.
Yeah.
But then there's this aspect of, okay, you can't always challenge, because then that's not the right balance. And then I got into all these weird ones having to do with existentialism and nihilism and nothingness. And I think I've held on to a lot of that, but it's matured into something more like just the ambiguity of standards. And if it is so ambiguous, recognize it, accept it, and just know that if it's feeling good at the time, then it's probably not worth delving too deeply into.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's sort of like, I look at the work of the French novelist Saint-Exupéry. I love his work. Wisdom of the Sands, his final work, is really his master work. And he would say, you take a people, and he has a story about these refugees. It's a fictional story about these refugees who had come to his father's citadel, and he said, watch, my boy, I'm going to teach you something. And he had the refugees come in, and he provided for them. He just gave to them, and he asked nothing for return. And he says, watch, they'll grow sickly before you. And he started to show how people who have nothing but their lives provided for them become very sickly. And he says, and many of these people, they fought amongst themselves. And he says, the lesson became, if you would have them be as brothers, constrain them into building a tower. But if you would have them hate each other, throw them corn. I mean, it's sort of one of his, again, beautiful lines in there. And he talks about, he says, many of them, they would have no idea of the radiant selves that could be born of them, but give them a desert and give them a real task where they have to come together. And the desert will rip off the old skin, and suddenly people find a purpose, and then they wonder why for so long they lived like stall-fed animals. I think there is something about many people they're like in the YouTube zoo. They're walking around with stall-fed comforts, and they're miserable, and they can't see beyond the horizon. But if you actually would throw them into real recalcitrance, some of these people have amazing, beautiful radiance that would be born of them in facing these hardships. To me, the struggle becomes many people, when they join the military, they get involved in war. These are the most meaningful experiences of their lives. They become absolutely addicted to the vigor of real resistance. The problem is, how do you bring meaning, genuine meaning to people's lives while minimizing the damage? See, to me, YouTube is sort of like a drug that I find, maybe it's useful in that if people were to realize how much meaning they're being robbed of, they would end up becoming dangerous maniacs who would get on missions trying to bring about real social change. I think there could be a potential of that actually happening if some people would be awakened to how much meaning there is. I mean, we're meaning generating organisms, man. I mean, people are willing to give their lives for purposes, and I'll tell you, they go out in a blaze of radiance when it happens. The problem is the horrifying costs of some people's quests for meaning. So I think YouTube is, in that sense, it's a beautiful thing that keeps people who would otherwise maybe be very dangerous, away from doing their missions. But so I see it as it is a very, very complicated dynamic that's going on here.
So YouTube is an outlet for the outcasts.
Yes, it keeps people who probably feel meaninglessness, a kind of languor and indifference, where they would be an absolute, just a bloom of a rose, fragrant of all meaning, if they would get involved in missions of radical self-sacrifice for causes. The problem is, what is the cause? What is the damage? The question of what have been the costs in history of people's quest for meaning. I think this is largely Ernest Becker's, one of his great contributions was to say, what is the cost for people's meaning? For him, one of the great insights of the 20th century was that people aren't animals killing to vent aggression. We're animals who kill for meaning. And much of the killing and the horror that's going on in the world is actually striving for meaning. Whether it's people trying to be wealthy, trying to be powerful, trying to be right, trying to be chosen. I mean, you give it. There's people on meaning quests, and they bring others down on the quest.
Yeah, I really took on to that. I really do take on to that, the idea that we do create as opposed to, we're meaning creating machines.
And this is why art is so important, to try to get people to see that transcending the world transcending their own plight through comedy, through art, through scientific endeavor. There are so many ways to live a kind of self-mortifying, a kind of to impose upon oneself for the benefit of others. Whether that's working hard to tell a joke or to do a great dance or whatever it is. I mean, there's lots of different ways to sublimate that principle.
Yeah, I guess how large does the goal have to be? That's the phrasing, the way that you might not agree with it. There's the scope or the scale of different meaningful experiences. One being sort of like a long-term quest for success. D.H. Lawrence called it the bitch goddess success, because people plan their lives out in this teleology with a beginning and an end, and every step in between planned out for them. And when they die, and it's kind of like the entirety of the life itself, the history, whatever is in the book, in the memoir, that's the meaningful conquest. That's the achievement. For others, it's a very temporary, ephemeral thing. The new age be one with yourself. That would be the other extreme of the scale. And the questions I always have is, what time frames do I set for myself, and what kinds of experiences and emotions are going to come from the different ways that you can bring yourself to these moments. Yeah. It seems like when you have a challenge in front of you, when I think of a challenge, I think of determination and adversity and attrition. It's kind of a longer term thing, but I always ask, what is the right balance?
Right. I mean, I do think, the larger the time frame or the more expansive of horizon in space, time, or other that you can include into your action, I guess the greater potential for meaning there. And I've written so much on this. My Sources of Significance books, tries to lay out a whole model of the different ways that people bring meaning. But I think, the way that I would maybe respond to it is try to think of the difference between someone who writes a book and someone who juggles. Okay, so I'm an author and I also juggle. And to me, juggling is, and I want everyone to know this, juggling is more important to me than are the books. The books are fun, but the books have the problem of making it seem like it's about having left a legacy. And that they make it seem like because the act transcends itself and reaches into time, and I can stand by and go, look, I have these books in my wake, they make it seem like the art was having the thing created, whereas juggling is so much more beautiful. Juggling, the well-juggled juggle admits no hoarding. It disappears. I can throw 5 up in the air and I'm holding them, and then it disappears. And now someone might say, well, can't you see it's going to be less meaningful because there's a shorter time span that you're opening to? But no, each of them are arts which open to the eternal. They open to the imagination's limit of all that's ever been. And when you try to say, I'm going to try to write the best book that has ever been written, or you say, I'm going to try to juggle the best juggle that has ever been juggled, in either case, there is a meaning horizon of excellence that comes out. The problem is that the one tricks you into thinking it's about having things left in the wake. The other reminds you that it's only the ongoing inspiration of how the eternal opens to the ongoing succession of fleeting, vaniscent nows. I mean, there is just a fleeting sense of nows going on, and yet there's a backdrop of beauty and grace that can be opened in great art, in musical accomplishments. I mean, singing, dancing, and juggling, to me, are the preferred arts over sculpting, painting, and writing, just as examples.
I come from a political philosophy kind of angle, and I was always talking about the implications of these kinds of ideas for politics, because, like it or not, that's what politics should be geared at, is bringing meaning to existence for, societies at large, and that gets into huge moral and ethical problems that don't exactly have an answer. And then there's these kinds of what questions are asked as to what would be the ideal way, not just to get to some kind of utopia, or what would Hegel call it, a universal homogenized state, right? But how to get there in a way that both satisfies all of the wants and desires of every single individual uniquely, and the greater, the meaning that they each have as individuals, and everybody together at once.
I mean, I think the best is the enemy of the better, and I mean, I want to believe that we're trying. I think we're trying to get there. Will it ever be purely achieved? I don't know. I mean, some of that just sounds, I mean, I look at it, I posted that Jeremy Rifkin video, which I really like, about, there would be no empathy in heaven because imperfection is what generates empathy. I think a very interesting argument. But yeah, it would just seem that the perfection itself is unattainable, but we continue to try to move toward it. And you can see lots of examples of everything from civil rights to the way that we understand childhood as a very important part of the developmental period, in the way that was just not understood for thousands of years. And so we're really understanding the importance of childhood today in the way that we hadn't. We're really understanding disease, pain. I mean, the post-morphine world is a radically different world. I mean, public execution, public torture, we have a very different sensibility of it than for thousands of years. So I think there are many fronts where we really can see something like people worrying about the plight and suffering of the other. Now, how well we're achieving it, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a complex, contradictory, it's a mess.
What else is that? What kind of a balancing between, the value in the temporary, ephemeral experiences of meaning and the long-term picture? I mean, isn't a child who is given the free range to enjoy things like play, that's very different than how it used to be. J.S. Mills is an example. His father was very strict and told him, and had him learning Latin in a very formalized way. Right. 3 years old, right? And then he had no emotional richness, right? These days it seems like we're balancing the end goal, the intellectual mission, turn people into intellectual machines, with the shorter term goals of happiness in every given moment.
I mean, I think a lot of people, let's go back to, so much of the discussion we were having earlier. I think there are many people who, in their eagerness to abandon religion wholesale because they've seen, that the organized religions are potentially hypocritical and bankrupt, and they no longer can believe some of the dogma. But then in abandoning it all, they're right now running to, I don't know, gluttony, wealth accumulation, self-indulgence, all kinds of other things that the ancients would say, look out, you're probably not going to find happiness there. And then the religious dogma's appropriated on that. Well, now they've gotten rid of the religious dogma again, but they thought they could get rid of those psychological insights. I think there are tons of people who are miserable, but they're trying to bring a meaningful life about. That is, more people today are more aware of needing to make a life, to turn one's sheer animal existence into something meaningful and to accomplish a meaningful life. But as that's become more and more secular, I think some people they thought they're going to find it at the end of a, I don't know, of a commercial or of a bag of chips or of a something.
My self-help book.
Yeah, of a self-help book or whatever, right? And it could be that, they may not find it in, again, believing in religious dogma. They're not going to go and try to convert people to, find people to save their soul and all this kind of stuff. But it may be forms of meditation. It may be forms of charity work or community work. It may be forms of self-disciplined artistic practice. But just point blank going, that's right, I'm an animal and it's me time and I'm just going to indulge this me and make sure that I'm well fed and that I'm comfortable. I think many people end up doing that, but the meaning horizons of their lives end up so shrinking that this little animal who's well fed and gratified can't figure out why it's miserable.
Have you heard of the Alexander Kochev's theory of the animalistic West versus the formalistic Japanese? Did you ever read that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he has a kind of an overarching theory that actually
the Hegelian Kochev?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it appeared in a footnote, but my professor tried to expand on it to kind of he tried to match it with his Samuel the Huntington clash of civilization argument that he was trying to define the differences between the East and the West, but he argued, and he matches it with the McLuhan type of hyper-speed way in which media is developing and how that's contributing to this natural tendency with Western individuals to go more in that animalistic direction and to really get quicker and quicker, get their fix quicker and quicker,
right,
meaning things,
right.
And how there's this kind of the shame culture in Japan where it's not about feeling good in the motions, it's about the motions and the conventions and the acceptance that others have for you by you displaying those conventions. That's important. And then there's this fine balance in any given society between these two things.
Right. I mean, I do think there is a big difference between pleasure and happiness. And as soon as you start to talk about the importance of having a meaningful life and the importance of really feeling good about who one is as a person, people immediately think you're talking about pleasure and animal gratifications rather than eudaimonia and wisdom that comes from happiness and of realizing, again, of participating in a larger world, of feeling that one is relevant, that one is called upon, and when called upon, one has something to give. I mean, I think there's so many different dynamics that go into it.
Yeah. And who is it that's calling upon, whether it's yourself or somebody else,
Yeah.
Well,
should we, I mean, we're probably at an hour. I don't know who, if anyone, has stuck with us throughout all of this. We'll have to see.
Good for them, eh? Well, if I can, I'm actually taking my first step into the world of teaching myself right now.
Good for you.
This is my first ever test that I ever have to mark.
Oh.
That's what I was doing before I spoke to you, and now I'm off to
You have to do some grading today.
So it's actually pretty scary, but I guess it's part of that growth and challenge that is ultimately going to bring me to that point where I feel like I've done something meaningful and fulfilled my calling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are great. Again, those are good examples to look at that difference between truth and responsibility. I think you think about that as you're grading. It was very, very interesting the way some of those seem to be trade-offs between truth and responsibility. I think this is partly why advice seeking is what it is in our society. People want to do something. They know they shouldn't do it, so they'll go seek out advice from someone who they know is going to tell them to do it, and then they can go, well, you told me to. You know, it's like, they go, well, look, I did a survey, and I went. They go out and they find information that validates it. Oh, it's really funny. They want someone else to also shoulder the burden of responsibility for their doing it.
No, it's probably no better than what they already know.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
They already know what
Right.
they need to do in most cases, it seems
Right.
to me.
Like Geiger has the line where he says, being confirmed by others frees me from being responsible for the absurdity of my belief. So if you do something and it's ridiculous, you'll get called out. But if millions of other people are doing the exact same ridiculous, no one will point to you as responsible.
Well, what is the logical conclusion of somebody with no responsibility? Is it not determinism? Is it not you are being driven by something that's not you? Like, is there such thing as a human being without responsibility, without agency? Because what is agency?
I mean,
Agency is what? Listening to your will?
That would be a topic for probably a whole other video.
Yeah.
Is there a person there without responsibility and agency, and what do we call that?
Yeah. Well, let another day handle that.
Hey, thanks so much, Lee.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's great to finally get face to face with you, Professor. You've been an inspiration, so I hope to.
Well, I appreciate it. It was a fun discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Okay.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.